Canadian mortgage lender Romspen is facing a liquidity crisis as investors seek to exit the fund. This is largely due to the fact that obviously with Canadian housing prices going down, people and institutional investors are trying to limit their exposure to the real estate market. But the question here is this the same type of liquidity crisis that happened in 2008 in the US? And what will be the greater impact on the Canadian real estate market as a result of what is otherwise a really scary headline? And I'm going to delve into all the details of that in this video. But before we get into it, do me that favor, hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And if you're the type of person who's looking to thrive financially, this is the place for you. So go ahead and make sure you do hit that subscribe button. I appreciate each and every one of you who does. Oh, and after we deal with what is otherwise a really scary headline, I'm going to tell you a little bit about a program that we've put together to help you buy real estate in Canada, because it seems, and this is an indication as well, that there's going to be some buying opportunities in the future. So you're going to want to make sure that you're well informed so you can make a better buying decision. I'll tell you all about that at the end. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's discuss what's going on with Canadian lender Romspen. So I want to jump in and show you the headlines at first, because the headline is quite honestly very scary. Mortgage fund in Canada halts payouts amid liquidity crisis. And the reason this is so scary is because we all know that what led to the 2008 financial crisis in the US was a result of a liquidity crisis. Now, it's a little bit different type of a liquidity crisis than what we're going to face here. And I'm going to tell you in a second what we're facing here. But let me remind you what happened in 2008. The liquidity crisis that was faced in 2008 was the result of the belief that housing prices could go nowhere but up. And subsequently, lenders were lending to pretty much anybody who wanted to buy a property. They had what was called ninja loans: no income, no job, no assets. They were pretty much giving mortgages to anybody that applied, which, when the housing market turned, led to a situation where people couldn't actually afford their homes. In other words, they never had the income that they needed in order to be able to maintain the properties that they had purchased. And that was really what caused the liquidity crisis, when everybody stopped being able to pay, and where all the C mortgages started to default that were lumped in with the A and B mortgages. Well, that led to the collapse of the portfolios and subsequently the biggest financial crisis in the history of the world. Now, the question is, are we in the same place with the liquidity crisis that is happening now? And even though the headline might suggest that we are in a liquidity crisis, we actually aren't, because this is a very specific type of lender. Romspen is an investment corp that specializes in construction financing and development financing. So in other words, they have very large projects that they're investing in, and a large portion of the projects they're invested in, as you'll see over here, are over $20 million in size. So in other words, this is a lender that is funding development and building. This is not a lender that is funding normal mortgages. And how you end up investing in a company like Romspen is you end up being what's called an accredited investor, or an institution, or some other type of investor that has a significant amount of funds in order to invest. Now, what's an accredited investor in Canada? Well, it's somebody that earns over $200,000 in the past 2 years, and is expecting to earn more than $200,000 this year, or a couple who has earned over $300,000 in the last 2 years and is expecting to earn over $300,000 in the next year, or somebody who has liquidatable assets of over $1 million. So what we're talking about here is this is an investment vehicle for people that have a very high net worth. They are looking for higher returns, they're willing to take higher risk, and they have to be accredited in order to be able to make the investments in this type of lender. So what's happening here? Well, those accredited investors are looking to their portfolios and going, real estate is probably not a place that I want to be right now. And what that has led to is that has led to more people seeking to get their money out of the fund than the fund has available funds to give them, which led Romspen in September to come out with a news release and suggest that they were going to create basically a queue for people to be able to get their funds out of the Romspen fund. Wow, I'm really saying the word fund a lot. Anyways, so here's the problem, is they put out this notice in September stating that they were going to basically create a lineup in order to get your funds out. And this week, they came out with another notice that stated that they were going to have to simply defer redemptions altogether. Now, the problem here is this creates basically a run on the bank, or a run on the lender. If they start to show signs of weaknesses, everybody starts to want their money out, and the lineup gets longer and longer, which is why they've had to stop deferring altogether, is because they put out this notice, said we're going to create a lineup, and that lineup just got too big. That, combined with everything that's going on in the real estate market, has led to this uncertainty that is leading people to want out of this fund for whatever reason. Now, this is me just paraphrasing it. This may not be exactly what's happening, but what you have to understand is that Romspen is a very, very, very sophisticated fund. They have been around for over 50 years and they've faced this sort of issue before. The other thing that you have to realize is that while they are funding developments and construction, they are only funding up to 65% of them. And in the event that the developers or the people who are doing the construction default, then what Romspen will do is they will take over the project and they will put in their own people in order to complete the project, and in all likelihood be able to recuperate at least most of, if not all of the funds that they have invested. The only thing is they might have to complete the development before they're able to get those funds. So it's important that they be able to have the money in place to continue to operate the company, but also maintain the integrity of the fund by not letting a whole bunch of people take their money out. So while this headline is scary, the reality here is that Romspen is very much a sophisticated investor in this field. They are very much an investor that can weather the storm, and we still haven't seen reductions in housing prices that would put me in a place where I'm overly concerned about this particular lender. Now, obviously what's happening out there in the real estate market is the developers and the builders aren't able to sell the properties, which means they're defaulting on their payments because people aren't buying those new builds anymore. And the real concern here is that lenders decide that they don't want to invest in new construction and new builds, which is going to prevent people from building properties, which means we're going to continue to have a supply shortage. Now, recently I put out a video about why Canada's real estate market won't drop by 50%. We didn't even touch on this sort of subject in there. I'm going to link to that video at the very end of this one. But the lack of supply combined with significantly more new immigration that's expected, combined with the fact that it looks like lenders are going to start shying away from lending to new developers, pretty much means that we're going to continue to have a supply issue in Canada, which supports the thesis that housing prices are not going to crash here. And even though we may have one or two lenders here in Canada that end up facing liquidity crises, at the end of the day, if this remains isolated to certain sectors of the market, so in this case, new construction and building, well, then Canada's market still has a chance to have a soft landing in what is otherwise being noted as a pretty big correction right now. So obviously this headline is concerning, but it isn't necessarily as concerning as it should be. And I still do believe that we're having a pretty big buying opportunity for people who are buying residential homes right now. So if you're looking at getting into the residential market and you want to be able to buy with confidence, the key thing here and what we've learned from the pandemic is that you have to be knowledgeable. You can't just rely on your realtor, your mortgage broker, your friends, your family in order to give you the advice that you need in order to make sure that you don't make a bad purchasing decision. Because obviously, when we saw the run-ups in prices in Ontario and BC, realtors were often telling people to buy houses when maybe they should have been waiting a little bit longer. And that's the key thing here is if people would have been well educated in the real estate industry, they probably wouldn't have made the same decisions that they did. That's why we put together a homebuyer masterclass that's designed to help people make the best decisions for them based on their time horizon and not based on the advice of people who aren't necessarily in their shoes. So I show you things like how to assess a market and how to make sure that you are making the best buying decisions for yourself. And we've priced it really reasonably so it's accessible to anybody who's looking at buying a home, whether you're 3 months out, 6 months out, or 2 to 5 years out. And we also discuss things like saving down payment and everything else, basically from start to finish, so that you have the information that you need at every step throughout the process. You can go to homebuyermasterclass.ca to check that out. And if you found this video useful, do me that favor, hit the subscribe button and hit that notification bell. And don't forget to check out this video on why Canada's real estate market isn't going to drop by 50% anytime soon.